they're at risk of losing that community and have the following demands. And I want to lift those up because it's my job to do so. Establish safe sleep sites where people can legally camp. Implement a property receipt system. Prioritize permanent supportive housing over shelter first approach, as we just got done talking about. And establish an oversight board for OHS, including people with lived experience. I'm going to say these two and get off the record. The question I have on this one is, would you be willing to work with the residents and organizers towards these goals and commit to them before the approval of this budget? And they have been very clear about what they wanted. There has been some rationale that has been explained to me about why a shelter first system approach does not work. In fact, there was a gentleman in the camp who explained in detail to me that the reason why he's back out was because the shelter system has put him in a situation by stuff being stolen, pushing him out, whatever the case may be, that he can't get back in anyway. And so going back into the shelter system will be re-traumatizing for him. So I want to ask that question. The other thing I want to get on was, studies have shown time and again that permanent supportive housing is more effective than emergency shelters in keeping folks off the streets, as we've talked about. Philadelphia already faces a shortage of permanent housing units, and now we are confronting the possibility of significant federal funding cuts in light of this conversation. And I just want us to say it, how does an investment in emergency shelter align with the city's long-term goal to end, not merely manage homelessness? So those are my two questions. Would you be willing to work with those residents and organizers towards those goals, commit to them before the budget, and also just speak to how this particular investment in emergency shelter actually aligns with the goal of ending homelessness? And that'll be it for me for now.
Thank you. I want to make sure that I get all of your questions. So first, for the Committee of Lived Experience, we have had a committee in the past, and we plan to bring that back in the future. Mm-hmm. You know, we're starting with our Young Adult Lived Experience Committee, and then we'll plan to expand in the future. As far as the shelter expansion project, it is not a shelter-only process. So even as we're talking and collaborating with our the different providers and different agencies in the city, it is not a shelter only. We are also talking about the off-ramp to be able to provide housing services, recognizing, you know, some of the complications that everybody's aware of with the housing and some of the funding that we have for that. But I just want to make it clear that we are still looking at housing. We have other units that are permanently supported that are either federal funded or general fund as well, and we will continue to support those. But we are looking at different models, including whether or not we should bring SROs, which are smaller units that maybe are more affordable, into the mix. We're looking at different strategies with, like I mentioned, PHA, to see if they can help subsidize some of them. But some of the units that they already have subsidized with us are also at risk right now.
I just want to clarify. I was raising the point around shelter first as an example that one of the residents within this community that has been, so they're feeling pushed out, and there hasn't been a remedy with the being pushed out for what's going to happen with them. And some of them have been kind of cycled in and out. And I was saying that they didn't necessarily want to go into, at least one gentleman didn't want to go into the shelter system. It would be a return back to a situation that was traumatizing and why he was kind of out on the street in the first place. So given that, they had these particular demands that were leaning towards a more permanent solution, and the request was to get on record whether or not you would be willing to help meet those particular asks, which were, again, to establish safe sleep sites where people can legally camp, to implement a property receipt system because of the loss of property when these sweeps happen, prioritize a permanent supportive housing over shelter first approach, and establish an oversight board, which you said you already have done. So of those three, yes, I'm done.
Understand, and I can't speak to all of the demands that were mentioned, but I will say that both our teams and the DBH-IDS teams are going out trying to engage individuals who are willing to have that conversation, whether it's about shelter or other services. Our mobile assessors can go out and do housing assessments out at sites, and we will continue to offer that service.
I do want to add also to with the encampments, right, that you address the issue of mental health and behavioral health, because I've dealt with it in my district, and I do understand, people are homeless, but even when they offer support, and they decline their support, and they keep coming back to certain areas, particularly where there's children, right? Like, we got to figure out a way how we address that issue. And I dealt with a couple different rec centers in my district, right, where it become, just to be quite frank with you, an issue, because you do have children and people just setting up shop. And I get it, I want to be supportive. And so there's a mental health component, right? But there's also a matter of public safety because you're dealing with children. And I don't want to be in here at a hearing in the future where anything may happen and we weren't proactive just to make sure, even though we're addressing the issue of encampments, right? Also get public safety, at least what I'm dealing with in my district in terms of certain recreation centers and certain parks and playgrounds where people just set up and you got little kids who's subject to